Hi, this is Darla DeMauro from Heartwork Organizing, and I have a little problem in my sweater, and I'm going to show you how I fix holes in sweaters. I have two of them. This is actually a brand new sort of acrylic polyester sweater, and look at that, right in the sleeve, nice big hole. But I have another one that I got last season and has several holes in it. Look, it's been chomped on pretty badly, probably by some moths, but it is so pretty. It's a heather cashmere sweater. Oh, that's probably why it's been eaten. Got some food on it. Always put your sweaters away clean or things will get in it and start chewing on it. Anyway, it's nice cashmere and I am not willing to throw it away. So I'm gonna try and fix it. So if you wanna stick with me, this video might be a little long, but we'll see. I'm gonna show you exactly how I go through and fix holes in sweaters. Now the first thing you want to do is get a close match, a thread that's a close match to your sweater. It's just a regular old thread. This isn't like, fuzzy or yarn or anything like that. I'm not going to go out and get cashmere yarn to match my cashmere sweater, although that would be nice. We don't need to do that. So I pulled some blue spools out of my sewing box, which is real small. I don't, sew for a living or anything like that. And I'm pretty lucky because I have a pretty close match here to this sweater. So I'm going to use this. The other sweater, I'll just show you. I ended up, not loving any of these. If you do have to go with a thread that isn't a perfect match, that's okay. I'll show you why that'll work in a minute. But any one of these is kind of okay. This has a little bit more greeny in it than some of these blues over here, but if you do have to kind of sort of match something that's in the same family anyway, go with the lighter, not the darker version. It'll just show up less. And the reason I have this little sewing kit here is it actually had, I've pulled it out now and I'll show you, but it actually had another thread in it that was a much better match than any of my blues. So this is kind of a tealy thread, and I pulled it out. You don't need very much, so even just the small amount that was in my sewing kit's going to work. So let me pull these out of the way. I'm going to do the acrylic sweater first. Let me find the hole again. And you want to work from, usually when you're sewing, but definitely in this case, you want to work from the back side. So you're going to sort of turn it inside out. And I've already threaded a needle, and again, these are probably, even if you don't sew, these are probably items that you have in a regular home sewing kit. Now the one thing about this is you don't want to end up with a big old knot. It's just going to not be something that you want scraping against your skin. So as I described this here, you want to find your hole and kind of define where the right and left or top and bottom edges are. And then instead of going like you would normally sew front to back and then front to back, and you would go from one side of the fabric to the other. What you want to do in a sweater, or at least what I've found to be helpful, is to start on one side or the other, doesn't matter which. So I'm going to start on the right side here and kind of work my way left. But instead of going front to back on the sewing, I'm actually going to start a little bit outside of where I think my edges are. And I'm going to try to go right in the middle of each stitch, of each knitted stitch. All right, so if you can see that, see if I can pull that up a little bit more for you. I'm not going front to back. See if I can get that in focus here. I'm not going front to back. I'm actually trying to go right in the middle of the stitch and just go a little bit to the outside edges. All right, so if you see that, it kind of looks the same on the other side, right? You can actually maybe see it better there, that I'm going right through the stitches there. And then pull the needle all the way through, but you're going to want a fair amount of tail here, because unlike regular sewing where you might be doing a repair on a cuff or something like that, this tiny little knot here that you would normally make to stop the thread, if you pull it tight enough, it's going to come right through that knitted stitch. So leave a fair amount of tail out, because we're going to need that at the end of this process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to not, again, this is different than sewing. You're not going to like pull it really, really tight, because what happens is you'll get a pucker on the other side. And what we want to do is have sort of an invisible, well, we do want to have an invisible mend here. So I'm going to pull it, I'm going to say not tight, but I'm going to pull it snug. Okay, so you can start to see that edge is gathering up a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is start again on the outside border of where my hole is. There's no real science to this. It's not like I can go up one, down one, because the stitches are too small, but I'm trying to go right in the middle of those yarn stitches here and go a little bit to the inside and the outside of the tear or the hole. So now I'm going to pull now this is where you start to see the magic. I'm going to pull my thread all the way through. You don't need a ton of thread, but I'm doing a double line of thread on my needle here. So you can start to see I'm pulling it just very, very lightly, and I'm starting to close that gap. And because I'm working on the back side, I am pulling the rough edges up into the back side or the inside of the fabric. I'll show you what it looks like on the other side in just a second, but I'm going to do one or two more of these sort of bottom to top stitches through the gap. And sorry if I keep heading off the side of the screen here. And then you can see that you can't really see the hole much at this point. You can see where it's gathering up, and I don't want to gather it too tightly or you'll end up with that ugly pucker. Okay, and now as I start to get to the end, the left side of this, whoops, you can see I accidentally picked up half a stitch there. Okay, as I start to get towards the left side of this, that hole, I can't really see my finger through the hole anymore. Okay, and I'll do one more. Now this last one, because I'm really sort of outside of the edges of the gap now, or outside of the edges of the hole, I don't really want to pull it all, because what I'm trying to do here is match the thread, which is the same color, so it's going to be pretty invisible. I'm trying to match the thread through the stitch so it'll hold. I'm not trying to create a pucker. So I've got my finger right up against that hole here, but you can't see any skin. All right, so I'm going to turn it over and show you how this looks on the other side. It's not perfect just yet. I may play with this a little bit more, but again, my finger's right up against there and you can't see any skin. So certainly from across the room, and even somebody sitting right next to me is going to have a hard time finding that little flaw. So I've done the first thing that I wanted to do, which is sort of make sure that I don't have a gaping hole. And now I'm just going to sort of kind of fluff things up so that these rough edges are in fact on this side of the fabric, which is the inside of the fabric. And then I'm going to repeat the process so that I know that this holds. Oh, let me check back here. Yeah, okay. So you can see, I wouldn't call that invisible, but I would definitely call that mended. All right. So I'm going to repeat the process, going from left to right this time. And sorry, I know I keep wandering off the left side of the screen there. What I'm doing really, I don't want this thread to be on the opposite side of the garment at all at this point. And I'm not trying to pull at all. I'm just pulling the thread through, but I'm not pulling it. And I'm even kind of starting outside, a little bit further outside of the gap here. And I want my needle mostly on this side of these stitches. See that? Not much needle over here, right? So that as I pull this through, I'm just reinforcing. So that's what, 6 stitches now. Not a lot of action here. I'm going to do this one more time. And then what I'll do is I'll try and maybe do 1 or 2 stitches going the opposite direction. So going, I'm sort of right on the right hand, whoops. I want to start down here. So you never kind of want to zigzag across. If my needle is down here, I don't want to start up at the top right corner, because then you have this gap of fabric that, of thread that you have to pull through. So instead, I'm going to start right there. This is almost right where we started. I'm going to start here. And again, this is the tricky part, I think, is trying to go through the middle of the stitches and trying not to have your needle be visible on the far side of the fabric. Does that make sense, hopefully? So I've got my needle all the way through. That means I'm pulling the thread through the actual stitches, not just on the far side of the fabric. And what I'm doing is I'm creating this little kind of cross stitch pattern, cross hatch pattern. So I'm going to go back this way now. Again, kind of going out to the farthest border where I know I've mended that gap, which hopefully you can't really see much here. And just, again, to make sure I don't have like this big trail of uncommitted thread here, I might actually take this through the stitches to meet where my original tail of thread is. Okay, so this is the one I'm working on over on this side, and this is the original tail. And now pull this away, and I need 2 hands. I'm actually just going to do a really quick sort of, again, very loose. I'm not tugging on the thread, but I'm going to go through and tie it twice, just like you would double tie your sneakers, and then trim this off pretty flat. Now, if you have kids that have sensory disorders or anything like that, this little bit of a knot here might cause them some trouble, but for most normal humans, that is going to be going over the top of, maybe another shirt, a t-shirt that you would wear underneath, so it's not going to be something that's going to get in your way. And on the far side, I can really kind of rough that up with my thumb before you're going to notice that there's anything there. So again, probably not invisible, but certainly from across the room, not something that somebody's going to see if I'm wearing a pink shirt, that they're going to say, oh, there's a hole because I can see a pink shirt under there. Okay, so that is sweater number 1. If you want to, see some more, I actually have to do this other one. This one is the one I really care more about, because I want to see if I can get, let's see, it looks like I have 3 little bite marks in here. 1, 2, and 3. This is the biggest one. So I'm going to repeat the process, turn it inside out, kind of assess where my borders of the tear are. Now, cashmere or anything that's wool is a little thicker, so I might actually have a better shot at getting in between the knitted threads. Okay, so here you can see I'm really starting on the very far edge of that tear, and I'm gonna do, just because I don't have a lot of thread here, this is the thread that I thought matched the best. And I'm going to do a single layer, where on the other one I was using a doubled over layer of thread. Okay, I want to leave a nice, fairly long tail because I have to finish this up by hand knotting it at the end, and so there's no reason not to leave a fair amount there. Alrighty, so now my thread is up here at this point, so I want to start the needle up here outside the border of the damage. And then, kind of go in. You can see where there's maybe 1 row of knitting here, another one. I kind of want to go down into that, second and third row of knitting, trying to keep my needle in the middle of the thread. And oh my gosh, if you're watching me do this, you probably love your sweaters as much as I do, because I know this is not the most exciting thing you could watch on TV today. But hey, it's cashmere, and if you were to take this to a dry cleaner, they would probably go, I don't really want to fix this for you, because it's It might take them 5 minutes, but it's kind of tedious work. They'd rather do something quick like, you know, fix a cuff for you or sew a button back on. There's a little bit of work involved in this, but as I start to close this gap, you can see that this is probably going to be worth it. And if you, okay, so I'm just going to straighten that up again. I had my needle in there and it felt like it was going all the way through to the far side of the knit. So I'm going to work really hard to kind of not do that. So you can see, because I haven't, you know, really tugged on this very hard, you can still see my finger in between there. But in the next couple of stitches, as I start to snug this up, now you can't see my finger anymore. Okay, and because this doesn't have a pattern per se in the knit itself, it's not like a fisherman's sweater or a shaker sweater, that's going to work in my favor too, so that I don't have to worry about messing up a pattern that lives on the sweater. But you can see, can you, let's see if I can get this in the camera, you can see the rows of knitting right there, right? That's what the machine knitted. So I'm kind of trying to work with those rows and actually work right in between them. So if you have a better way, you know, of fixing a hole in a sweater, I'm all ears, I'm happy to hear it, but I feel like for a sweater that looks great on me, you know, that I really like the color of and is a nice cashmere, that it's worth taking the extra minute to do this. In the old days, they would have, you might have read about families that would have darned socks, not like, oh darn it, but the term is darning socks or darning knits. And I'm not sure if this technically qualifies as darning, but see, this is where it gets hard because now I have done such a good job, I can almost not see where that final chew mark is. Right there. You can kind of see it's puckered up a little bit. I hope this is filming for you. This is a lot of detail. And I'm sorry about the length. I usually try and keep my videos to about 90 seconds, but this one, I figure, you know, if I run into some sort of thing and you run into it later, you're going to want to know how to handle it. So this one feels like it went all the way across. Okay, so I'm going to look like, yeah, there's a lot of needle over here. I did not want to see that. So before I pull the needle through, I'm going to correct that. Okay, so I'm going to try and thread it up, 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 up. It's the middle of it right there. Let me see if that's any better. Still a little more needle than I probably want to see. This is, like I said, this is the tricky part, is you're trying to go right in the middle of a stitch, a knitted stitch. That looks a lot better if you can see that. See that? That's the needle right there, but I don't see it coming across on the far side. So that looks good to me. So that was the biggest. Now this is the tail. He kind of got wrapped in here, so I'm going to pull him out. This was the biggest hole. I could literally stick my finger through there when we started, and now look at it. Not so much. I'm trying to press my finger through there, and I could if I needed to because it's not knotted on this far side. But what I'm going to do is kind of repeat my steps, but now going left to right. I'm going to end up over in that vicinity of the tail. And then I might do one stitch in the opposite direction, or I might not. On this one, it seems like it's doing a pretty good job of meeting up those knits, so I may not go across and create. What it does is it strengthens the mend that you've just worked on, but it also will potentially create a more of a pucker. And puckering is good for lips, but not for sweaters. So there, you can Instagram that one. Somebody create a meme out of that. Puckering is good for lips, but not for sweaters. Okay, and again, it's really important. You can see when I pull the thread through, I'm kind of just getting it to the point where there's a tiny little bit of tension, but not tugging it through. I don't want it to feel like I'm tying my shoes because that is too much tension and that will create a pucker. And just maybe, I'm guessing maybe 3 more passes here. And I want to make sure that it ends up, that the working end of the thread ends up near where that tail starts. So again, just to show you on this side, I've got that needle halfway through there, but I'm not seeing needle. That's important. Okay, see what I'm talking about? So as I pull it through. Now these needles, speaking of needles, they're not anything special. They are just regular sewing kit needles, which you could pretty much get at any, of course, sewing store, Michael's or anything like that, but also a dollar store, or even that sewing kit that I got from a hotel. You know, usually they have a cheapy little needle in there, and that'll work too. Don't need anything fancy. Okay, so you can see a little bit of the thread on this side, and you can see where the knits don't necessarily match up. That is totally fine because I'm still working on the back side, or the ugly side of the fabric, otherwise known as, sweater here. Okay, and I'm going to go 2 more stitches. I kind of want to get outside the original mend area. And so I'm going to pick that up, and then I'm going to come back one more time and finish it off. And you want it, when you're making that final, you want to actually get as close to the origin point. Whoops. Oh, you see, I think I created a pucker there. Yep, you see it? I actually had a little bit of a heavy hand as I pulled that through, so no worries. I'm just going to try and find that guy, loosen him up a little. Okay, and good. Alrighty. Okay, so focus in there again. And last thing, I'm just going to make a really light, again, do not pull like you're tying your shoes. You want to get to where the knot meets the fabric and then stop. If you pull it any further, it's going to pucker. And then do that again. This one is a little bit tighter, so now you've created a knot on the inside of the fabric. And then cut it off really close. And that was the largest of the 3 holes, sorry. So you can see there's a little one, there's a medium one, there's the one I just fixed. Again, because there's no discernible pattern here, that's going to be pretty hard to see, folks. I mean, that's a pretty good mending situation. Now, if that is right front and center underneath your chin, maybe that's not good enough for you, but I will tell you that I will be happy to have this nice, yummy cashmere sweater in my closet for another season. So, so that is it. Thanks for hanging with me, and hope you can give some life to your sweaters. And just remember, never put them in the closet if they haven't been washed or laundered or dry cleaned, because if there's any, not just food, but any oils that come off of our skin, the moths and critters can be attracted to over the winter over the summer. And then when you go to get them out in the winter, you'll have a nasty surprise in the form of these holes that you'll have to fix, but now you know how. So if you have any questions, just comment below. Thanks.